Hello there, Martha here. I hope you are well. I am doing great. God has been so good. First, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to me. Today today we are going to talk about Joseph again. This is actually my final video in this lesson from the Joseph series. That doesn't mean I can't revisit it whenever, but at least for now, I'm going to finish this series. So today we are going to be talking about we're going to look at the dreams God gave Joseph in Genesis 37, because I thought about it, and I thought it would be good to go back to the very beginning of when Joseph's story begins, at least when we are really introduced to him. So it's his dreams in Genesis 37. And then I want us to go all the way to Genesis 42, where we see something very significant happen. Now, Joseph's brother come to Egypt. That's in Genesis 42, because there was a famine in the land. And when they come before Joseph, they bow down before him. So the dreams in Genesis 37, you see that happen. The dream was there in Genesis 37. It comes to fulfillment in Genesis 42. When that happens, Joseph remembers the dreams he had. Now, if you remember the dreams Joseph had when he was young, his brothers were going to bow down before him. Remember? Like if you've read Genesis 37, something I've talked about in other videos, that in Genesis 37, the two dreams he had. And in Genesis 42, you see the bowing down coming to pass. There is a process there between Genesis 37 and Genesis 42. You know, one of the things that's really been interesting when I've read scripture is realizing the timelines. Sometimes we think something happened the following day or something happened the following week. And until you go and really do your research or read deeper, you realize, wait, there were years between what's happening at one point in time and what's happening the following, it wasn't a week. Let me say that it wasn't 2 days, unless it's really written that way. But it's very interesting because when you look at Joseph, at 17, his brother sold him. He ends up in Egypt and in Potiphar's house. Then Potiphar's wife falsely accuses him, and Joseph ends up in prison. He spent years going through things he probably never imagined when he had those dreams. So Joseph is 17 when he is sold. By age 30, he's the governor of Egypt. Okay, so 17 he's sold, 30 he's governor. So that's around 13 years? 13. And then years later, his brothers come before him and bow down. So it's not that when he became 30, that's when his brothers come. There is a 7-year when he was 30. So let's say to 37, when there's good years. It's not drought as in a right. So at 30 to 37 years old, approximately there, Joseph, they still don't know where he is. They don't know what's going on with him. He doesn't know what's going on with his family. And then we enter into the years where there's no food, where there's drought. And so we look at him, let's say he was 39 approximately 39, by the time they bow down to him. So we are talking there of around 22 years between when he was sold to when they bow down to him. It's approximately 22 years. Let me segue here because it's very interesting when I think about, let's say, like the prophetic and people who say things that God is saying are going to come to pass. And then people beat them because they haven't come to pass. And honestly, if you look at biblical prophecy, and even if you look at Isaiah and when he prophesied about Jesus, it was years to come. So, no, I'm not saying that people don't falsely say things. I am just saying that it happens. God doesn't... The timeline of God is not our timeline, and we have to understand that. Unless God says something is happening tomorrow, like I know there is in one of the stories, I believe it's in the Kings or Chronicles, where he said by tomorrow this is going to happen. Then yeah, by tomorrow, because he's given a timeline. But generally, God doesn't even... We don't understand his timeline. We don't know how long. He didn't know 22 years. He didn't know by 30, like 13 years, he would be somewhere in some servant's house. I mean, he would be a servant somewhere. He didn't know those things. So 22 years is a long time in our minds, but when God is working out his plan, that's just what he said. Those 22 years, that's when they were gonna come down. Approximately 22 years. Now, Joseph went through very difficult things during that season before he becomes a governor. It was difficult. But there's something I want us to understand. God showed Joseph the dream, but he did not show Joseph the process. God showed Joseph the dream, but he did not show Joseph the process. I can tell you a dream that I saw, oh my goodness, it's been years. But God did not tell me the process. If God had told me the process, I'd have just said, oh God, just take the dream. That's all good. I'm fine. And it's the same thing. Joseph had no idea. God did not tell Joseph, hey, Joseph, your brothers are going to betray you. He didn't say, you're going to become a servant in Potiphar's house. He didn't tell him Potiphar's wife is going to falsely accuse you. He didn't tell him you are going to end up in prison. And God never said to him, you're going to be forgotten there for a period of time. God simply gave Joseph a glimpse of his future. Joseph knew something was ahead of him, but he did not know how he was going to get there. Who can... Because I'm sure I'm not the only one. When I've seen something and I'm like, when am I arriving to this thing that you said, God? And I think many of us can relate to that. Sometimes God gives us a desire. Sometimes he gives us a vision. Sometimes we have something in our heart that we believe God has called us to do. But he doesn't give us the entire roadmap. It's like a day-to-day walk with him. By the way, I'll say this. It's so important, that day-to-day walk with him, because trust is being built. Character is being built. So many things, and I'm going ahead of myself. But that day-to-day is so important. You see, God doesn't have to tell us everything we are going to encounter along the way. And that can be difficult. That is actually quite sobering when you think about it. He doesn't have to. Now, because we want the dream, but we don't always want the process. We want the dream. We want the thing. I mean, I saw this. I want to be there. But we don't want the pain. We don't want the difficulty. We don't want the tears. Nobody ever wants tears or pain or difficulty. We don't want those things. We want the destination, but we don't want the journey. We don't. I don't know anybody who says, I'm fine with the pain, oh Lord. I mean, please tell me if there's somebody you know who's excited about going through pain. So today I want to speak to three people. Three people. The person going through the process, the person who has arrived, okay, and the person who struggles with consistency. That's just three people. The person going through the process. You're currently going through difficulty. Maybe things are not going the way you thought they would. Maybe you're wondering, why is it taking so long? Excuse me. Maybe you're asking God, when is this going to happen? And I want to tell you something. Please don't give up. The process is hard. Read the whole of scripture and see whoever became. Their process was difficult. But the process is necessary because God is preparing you for where He is taking you. Let me go to the children of Israel. They come out of Egypt. They go to the wilderness. And the wilderness is a place of preparation. The difficulty was a place of preparation. They had a slavery mindset. I don't know what's going on with my throat today. They had a slavery mindset that needed to change. And unfortunately, it did not change with that generation. Even though they saw wonders, it didn't change. But the wilderness is meant to teach you more about God. At least for when I look at the children of Israel, teach you more about God, teach you to fight, build your muscle. So that when you get to where God is taking you, those things that are over there don't distract you. Okay, so now think about Joseph. I know I've talked about the children of Israel, but think about Joseph here. God had already created the position Joseph would eventually occupy. Joseph was going to become governor. God had already created that. But Joseph at 17 was not ready to walk into that position. Not. There were things that had to happen in his life. There were things that had to be developed in his character. There were experiences he had to go through. There were things he had to learn. And sometimes we look at where God is taking us, but we don't understand why we have to go through what we are going through now. But God may be working on something in us that we cannot see. Let me just say He's working on things we just cannot see. He may be developing our character. He may be teaching us patience. He may be teaching us humility. Ooh, don't we need humility? He may be teaching us how to handle responsibility. He may be preparing us to deal with people. Because sometimes it's not enough for God to get you to the place. He has prepared you for the place. He has to prepare you. He has to. So if you are in a difficult process right now, please don't give up. You may not understand what God is doing. Joseph probably didn't understand it either. But the fact that he was in the pit did not mean the dream was dead. Listen. The fact that he was a servant did not mean the dream was dead. The fact that he was in prison did not mean the dream was dead. He was simply going through the process. And I want to encourage you as well. Keep going. You are going to make it. In Jesus' name. You are going to make it. The second person I want to talk to is the person who has arrived. To that dream that you had, you have gotten there. You have arrived. You have finally gotten to that place. God showed you some eons ago. Maybe you prayed for that position. I don't know. Maybe you prayed for that opportunity. Maybe years ago, you couldn't imagine being where you are today. And now you're there. You finally arrived. I want you to remember something. By the way, I hope by what I'm saying, this encourages you. I'm not trying to put you down in any way if you have arrived. But I want to encourage you, and I'd like you to remember. Don't forget the process. Don't forget that process. All those tears, the pain, just don't forget the process. that process keeps you humble. It reminds you that without God, you'd not have made it. Don't forget where you came from. And don't forget why God placed you there. Joseph didn't become governor simply so that Joseph could be important. God had a purpose for putting Joseph in that position. There was a famine coming. There were people who needed food. And God was going to use Joseph to preserve lives. That included his own family. So Joseph's position wasn't just about Joseph. And I think sometimes we forget that. We can think God finally gave me what I wanted. But maybe God gave you that position because there is somebody who needs what you carry. Maybe God gave you that position, that platform, because someone needs to hear what you have to say. Maybe God gave you that business because there are people you are going to employ. Maybe God gave you that position because he wants to use you to make a difference. Think about Esther. Esther became queen, but it wasn't simply because she was beautiful. There was a purpose behind her position. God placed her there because he was going to use her to save his people. So if God has elevated you, stay humble. And also, when God, even this, for people who haven't arrived and you're seeing the arrival, like, let me segue. When the children of Israel were just in front of the Jordan, they could see green. They could see how green the place was, because on the side before you cross the Jordan to the land, the promised land, right there, there is greenery. It's very beautiful because there is water. So even if they were in the wilderness, that place looked so wonderful. That is why 2.5 tribes didn't cross the Jordan, because that place looked so good. So for people who are seeing, you're looking at the Jordan, you're about to cross, time is coming. You have a very short time. Don't forget that God is placing you at a place for the sake of something. It's not just. Remember to stay humble. Then remember the process that brought you there. And remember, you still need God. Oh, you still need God. Oh, let me not even talk about something that I saw, or something that the Lord was showing me about ministers who have arrived. Let me say it this way because it's important. Ministers who have arrived, and they can be on fumes, meaning they are not following God the way they're supposed to, and they are not seeking God the way they're supposed to anymore because they arrived. That's a very dangerous position to be in. It's one of those places that you do not want to find yourself. And it doesn't help because many of us Christians, don't even have the discernment to see that this person is on fumes, that this person is on autopilot. We don't have sometimes the discernment to see that. We still think this person is doing what they're supposed to be doing. Those are discussions of other days, so let me get out of that. Success can make us forget our dependence on God, by the way. Don't let that happen. I could go to that strong man. What was his name? I've forgotten his name. That man who had so much strength. Samson. Oh, I probably will teach on Samson one day. Don't let your success make you forget God. Depend on God. Whatever position you are in, remember that God placed you there for a reason. The last person I'll talk about too is the person who struggles with consistency. Consistency is very important. So there's this dream I had where God was showing me in a dream, because it was him, and he showed me two women, and one of them was busy. I mean, she was busy just helping people, doing the different. I could just see her walk around, and there were people she was really helping, and she was actually doing the work that God placed in her heart to do. She was doing what she was meant to do. The second woman, I could see her office. It was in a nice, beautiful building. I could see she had an office. I watched her walk out of the office and walk into an elevator. And this elevator it would go up and she would stay in there, and then it would come back down and she would still stay in the elevator now. Anyway. And then it could go up and then she would still stay in there. And then next time I saw her, when it went down, she got out of it. And then she was running to get back into the elevator because her office was going to be closed. Now, I don't have time to tell you the whole interpretation of that dream. I will just say this to you. That woman is not consistent. She is not consistent with her walk. She's not consistent with reading scripture. She's not consistent when it comes to prayer. She's not consistent with what she has been called to do. She has an office. She does. But she's not consistent. And she's walking out and trying to get back in, and she's not consistent. And let me tell you something about consistency. Consistency is very important. Let me go back to the dream. God desires that woman who's not consistent to be like the woman who is doing what God called her to do, or what God created her to do. God desires of that person, this second woman, to be like the first woman. But this second woman has to make a decision on what she wants to do. She has to cooperate with God, if I'd say it that way. It's very difficult to accomplish anything meaningful if we are constantly starting and stopping. One day we are motivated, the next day we are not. 1 week we are focused, the next week we are distracted. And before we know it, months and years have passed. We have to understand that purpose requires consistency. We have to be consistent in your calling. You have to be consistent in your work. You have to be consistent in your walk with God. You have to keep showing up even when you don't feel like it. And I'm not saying that you are never going to have bad days. We all have them. I am not saying you are never going to get tired. You will. I'm talking about making a decision that you are going to continually allow, you are not going to continually allow distractions to take you away from what God has called you to do. Is the enemy fighting? Absolutely. I tell you, he's at work. But some of us, he doesn't even need to work so hard. He does not. Because we just have refused to focus. Anyway. So if consistency is something you struggle with, I want you to do something. Sit down, get a piece of paper, and write down your distractions. What distracts you? What is taking your attention away from your purpose? What are you spending your time on that is not helping you become the person God created you to be? Let me stop there and tell you a story. Years ago, my God, it's been years. I remember, I think it was CSI. CSI was a show I watched from when it started, maybe at around 2 p.m. You know, when they do reruns, to 7. 2 to 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 5 hours. I was just watching CSI. One day God said to me, this has become more important than him. I stopped the CSI. So, if I watch a show, it's because I'm tired my head or something, but I had to stop. And many of you know what I'm talking about. You watch movie after movie after movie. Like your life, like God doesn't exist. So, write down your distractions. And then when you look at your list, ask yourself, which of these things can I get rid of? There are some things you can change, by the way. There are other things you're going to have to take to God. For example, bitterness. Bitterness can become a huge distraction. You know, when Absalom ended up killing Amnon, it was, I think, a period of 2 years where he was just, he had been so bitter and he was going to kill him. For 2 years. This is all he thought about, how he was going to kill Amnon. 2 years. That's what bitterness does. You are constantly thinking about a person who is not even thinking about you, doesn't even probably care, and you're there just ruminating. You may need God's help to heal you from what happened. You may need to surrender it to God. Not even you may. I believe you need to. You need to forgive. That's just true. But I'm not telling you something I've not had to do. What maybe I've not allowed myself to get to the place of bitterness. I just haven't. And the reason why is because I have been in the middle of people who are bitter. I know the ugliness, that spirit. I felt that. I don't want to be involved in. I don't want that thing to be anywhere near me. I just don't. It was one of the most ugly things I'd felt when I was in between people who are bitter. God allowed me to feel that ugly. Ugh. So please, I'm not telling you something I have not. I have forgiven. And I'm sure there are people who've had to forgive me. And I hope they've forgiven me and I'm not running around in their head for things I probably did or did not know that were wrong. Okay? Maybe one day I'll address the idea of forgiveness, because sometimes it's our perspectives about things that is wrong and not because somebody did something bad. But we'll talk that. Hopefully we can talk about that some other time in the future. Now, you may need to let go. Ask God to help you. Please don't allow people to just be roaming around in your head day in, day out because you're angry at them. The other thing you probably need to do is write down your goals if you have not. Write down what you believe God has called you to do. Write down what you need to work on and then start working on it. Do you know, when you don't have people freely roaming in your head, so there's what they call TDS, right? Trump derangement syndrome. So remove his name there and put whoever it is you're angry at or whoever it is you're bitter with. Maybe it's somebody called Annette. Annette deranged syndrome. I'm telling you that when you hear, even if you meet somebody called Annette, you don't even want to talk to them because they remind you of an Annette somewhere. Nothing about people who are called Annette, so please don't. I just picked a name from somewhere. So write down what you need to work on and then start working on it. Don't worry about your age. Don't worry about what month it is. We're in August. Just because you are looking back and saying, I have done nothing since January, that's all good. Look at the glass half full, not half empty. Don't tell yourself, well, I should have started this years ago. Well, it's true, but how about you do it now? Don't think about this is what I should have done years ago. Don't dwell on that. Just start now. You are where you are. Work with what you have. Remember, God can accelerate things. God can open doors. God can make things happen faster than we ever imagined. But we can also stop ourselves from becoming who God created us to be. Sometimes it's not the devil. No. Sometimes it is our own choices. Sometimes it is our lack of discipline. Sometimes it's our distractions. Sometimes it's unforgiveness. Sometimes it is fear. Sometimes we simply keep putting off things, procrastinating. And that is why we have to examine ourselves. We don't know the process, but we know who holds our future. When I look at Joseph's life, I'm reminded that the dream and the process don't always look alike. The dream looked like his brothers bowing before him. The process looked like a pit. The process looked like slavery. The process looked like false accusations. The process looked like prison. But God was still working. Joseph didn't know everything that was happening. He wasn't privy to all the information. He was simply on a journey toward what God had showed him. And maybe that is where you are today. You have a dream. You have a calling. You have something you believe God has placed in your heart, but you don't understand the process. That's okay. You don't have to know everything. You just need to know that God is walking with you. You just need to know that when God needs to carry you, He's going to carry you. Just keep walking with God. If you are in the process, don't give up. If you have arrived, don't forget your purpose. And if you struggle with consistency, make some decisions. Remove the distractions you can remove. Ask God to help you with the things you cannot handle on your own. Make better choices. Keep showing up. Keep growing. Keep walking with God. Because you don't know what God is doing behind the scenes. If you go to the book of Esther, God is never mentioned, but you know God is working behind the scenes. You don't know the things you are experiencing today are preparing you for something you will need tomorrow. You don't know. Joseph probably never imagined that the pit was connected to the governorship. He probably never imagined that the prison was connected to that position he was going to be in. But God knew. And that's the thing about God. God sees the whole picture when we only see a very tiny part of it. So trust Him. Trust the process. You know what? Trust God in the process. Trust God in the process. Keep going. Remove that trust the process. Just trust God in the process. Keep going. And remember, God may give you the dream without showing you the process, but He's still God in that process. Thank you so much for joining me for these lessons from Joseph's series. It's been such a joy to share the little that I have learned from the story of Joseph. I hope these lessons have encouraged you, challenged you, and helped you see Joseph's story in a different way. Until next time, God bless.